Hi, it's Jane, and I have a little project that I'm going to start, so I thought I'd take you along with me. But first I'm going to explain the project. I have always had a prayer journal and basically a book like this. This one is grid notebook, so it's a little bit different. But normally mine are just line pages. But this one is a blank one I just got. So I decided I wanted to move that from this to something else. Because many times in our church, we support several different missionaries. And throughout that, we have pictures of the missionaries on postcards so that we can either write them or just to have them somewhere so we can remember to pray for them throughout the week. So I saw a video, and this is an old video. I don't even know if the woman is still alive, that explained the way her prayer journal was. But I saw it and I thought, wow, I really like that idea. So I'm going to give it a try and see how it goes. And I'm not real sure how I'm going to track. I mean, one thing that's real important is to be able to know whether or not the prayer has been answered one way or the other. And many times you have to go back to that person or those people and say, was this prayer answered? Do I still need to pray for this, whatever it is for you? And so that you can, I like to mark that it was answered, you know. And that's just me. A lot of people don't bother with that, but I like seeing it. I like seeing that the prayer was answered. So anyway, what she uses is a notebook. Just a standard, you know, loose leaf notebook like this. So I picked up this one. This is a 1.5 inch right there. So I want to make a cover for it though. I don't want to leave it plain. So that's what we're going to do. Now this first cover that I'm going to make is what I call my mock-up, and it will work until I get the one that I want in there permanently. And because I'm going to use my embroidery machine for the final one that I'm going to do. I want to put on the front of this, pray without ceasing, you know, that kind of thing, or prayer fervently, whatever. Haven't decided definitely. It'll probably be pray without ceasing. So I would like to do that, the embroidery, and then finish it off, you know, a little bit nicer that way. So I'm going to make the mock-up first, and we'll take you over to the table and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. And from there, I will use the mock-up until I get the other one finished. Because the other one, I'm going to have to make the dimensions a little bit wider, a little bit taller, because I am doing some quilting, the embroidery, and all that kind of thing on that one itself. This one is just going to be a plain cover, and this is the type of thing you can make just for a plain cover to go over anything, whether it is a composition notebook, a spiral notebook, or, you know, just any kind of book that you want to put a cover on. And it's just the down and dirty basic. So we're going to do the down and dirty basic, and then as I get finished with the other one, I will come back and tell you exactly what I had done in another video. Okay? All right, see you over at the table. Hi, it's Jane, and we are in the sewing room, and so there are some things that you would need if you are going to do this and you need to measure your book. Excuse the hair. I don't know what's going on with the hair this week. It's just got a mind of its own, and it doesn't matter how many times I fix it, it's It's like wackadoodle. So we're gonna just call this Crazy Hair Week at my house, but yeah, that's kind of the way things are rolling, it seems. So you're going to need whatever book you're going to be measuring, whether it be your notebook, or if you are covering a composition book, or even if you are covering any other kind of book. Say it's a standard paperback book and you would like to have covers on your paperback books, you know, as you're reading them. Whatever, you're going to need that book, whatever you want to be measuring. You are going to need a tape measure. You are also going to need a pencil or a pen for writing down whatever your measurements are so that it'll be much easier to work around. Now, and then you're going to need fabric for what you are wanting to do. You do not necessarily have to use a batting. A lot of people I know like just having fabric covers for their books. I have done that in several sewing classes where we've done embroidery on just a plain piece of fabric, and then we have turned it into a composition book cover, spiral book cover, whatever you wanted to use it for, and then not have any interfacing in it at all. I tend to like, if I'm going to be doing that, generally I do like some interfacing, and I will be honest with you, I will use the 809, the Craft. I think it's Craft. Is it 809? Don't quote me on that. I'm going to have to look it up. But it's a little bit of a stiffer fabric. Woven. It is a non-woven is what it is. It does give a little bit of body to whatever you are working with, so that you could use that quite frequently to change it out to different notebooks, different books, those kind of things. Doesn't wear as fast, doesn't wear out as fast. So that's why I like to use that when I am making book covers for myself at home, those kind of things. And many times when I am making book covers that I'm selling to you, I am using some kind of interfacing, whether it is a woven, a non-woven, batting, fleece, whatever. So keep that in mind. Now you will see this in bits and pieces and parts. I will not be wearing the same shirt all the time because I'm going to film this as I go along so that I can take you on this journey, so you can see how I do it from start to finish. Now, I'm not going to do a lot of the sewing. Well, I'll do the sewing on video, but most likely what will happen is it will be sped up so that you don't have to watch, you know, all the sewing. A lot of people don't like that part because it takes long, you know, because it could take me 15 minutes to sew around something. You don't want to watch 15 full minutes, so I am going to speed that up in those sections when I get to them. All right, the only other thing is you need to find some fabrics that you would like to use. I do tend to use an inner, outer, and then my pockets. And we'll get to that when we get to the measurements after I show you about those measurements. So yeah, that is it in a nutshell. So let's get into the rest of that tutorial. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, so in order to measure this, I'm going to show you with this simple notebook, first of all, what you're going to need. How you're going to measure. Basically, you're going to measure from one side of this book over to the other side. And like this is a little bit over 14.5, so I'm going to make it 14 3/4. You don't have to do that. I just like to round things up. Then you're going to measure from your top of your book down, and this is 9 3/4. So those are the measurements that I would use for this. And I am going to use this to document what I am putting on this notebook. Because I am going to also do a cover for it. So my initial measurement was 14 3/4 by 9 3/4. You're going to do the same thing with the notebook, okay? You're basically going to measure it from one end all the way around. This one luckily opens up flat like this. So I could really just take it from this edge to this edge, which is about 24.5 inches. And 24.5 by 11 3/4 approximately. So that is an easy way because this one opens up nice and flat. Not all will open up nice and flat, so you may need to actually take it from across around this way, from one end of the notebook, around to the other side like this. Okay? And that is another way to measure if you don't have one of these notebooks that opens up flat. Now keep in mind, this one opens up a little bit differently because as you can see, it sits right here that's not completely closed. And that doesn't bother me. It may bother some, but you know, that's the way it works. Now, in these, you have sleeves here that you could use to put things in. This is where you need to decide what you want to do. Do you want to be able to use some of the sleeve to slip in papers or not? And the reason I'm telling you this is because normally you would take about half of the size of whatever it is from your hinge part. And this one is 11 inches. You would take half of that. You won't take half of it. You would take that measurement by whatever your height is to make the pocket panels for these ends. A lot of people just use the top measurement, you know, from top to bottom. And then your width measurement would be 8 inches folded in half, would give you about 4 inches, which would probably be about right there. And that would be plenty as well. It just depends on how much of the book you want to cover, that kind of thing. But that is the normal, is to use that 8 inches, so that, you know, 4 inches will be on the inside of your cover. And I'm going to say approximately, because you are going to have a seam allowance added in there. And that throws, for a lot of people, they forget about the seam allowance. And then when they get their pattern, their piece on their notebook, it's tight, not only getting it in, but when it's on there, it's like really compressed and tight. And you could do that if you want to. I don't like to. I like to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance, which gives my seam allowance basically 1/4 inch. So I would add 1/2 inch. So I would cut my fabric for this 25 inches by 12.25 inches for this notebook here. For this one here, I would actually cut it 15.25 by 10.25. And that would give me that little bit of extra room for sewing. You do not have to do a complete, shall we say, 1/4 inch seam. You could do less than that. You could do an 1/8 inch, whatever works the best for you. However, I like to do the 1/4 of an inch. It works a little bit better, and it also gives a little bit more room for turning, those kind of things. Now, a lot of people would just use that as their measurement, and then they would fold over the top edge a little bit over, that kind of thing. I've also seen a lot of people edge it with bias tape around the entire thing, so you don't have to worry about the seams showing. You don't have to worry about a raw edge being on it. I tend to use the thing where I'm going to cut an inner fabric 25 by 12 1/4, and then my outer fabric 25 by 12 1/4, and then my pockets would be 12 1/4 inches tall by 8 inches, because that's what I'm going to use. And then that would be the pockets there for you to slide your book into. So I'm going to do that a little bit later. And then I will show you that process. I did decide that I am going to go ahead and do the embroidery piece and piece what I want to piece on it, so that you can see the entire thing from beginning to end, so it's not chopped up into 2 or 3 videos. Okay? Not real sure where that left it or if it kept it. I did finish this notebook in the first half, that the rest of it did not film. So the second half, I'm going to show you how to do this by using a composition notebook, which my composition notebook measures 9 3/4 tall by 15 across. So I'm going to cut a piece of fabric for that size. I have deer outside and cats are going nuts over it. But anyway, I did make this a little bit larger because I did want a little bit of the blue showing through for added protection. This one does have padding in it, but I'm not going to add padding to this one. So, like I said, the composition book is 9 3/4 this way, and complete side to side is 15 inches. So I'm going to add 1/2 inch to that measurement. So I'm going to be cutting my fabric 10 1/4 inches tall by 15 1/2 inches long. So I'm going to straighten this up a little bit and we'll get it cut and measured. Probably time to replace my blades, but I'm not going to do that. So I want this to be 9 1/4 inches tall. So I am going to measure that. And you notice I double check twice before I cut, because once you cut, you can't go back. The rule of thumb is measure twice, cut once. All right. Now, this scrap I'll save for something else. And we're only going to need one piece, but I am going to go ahead and pull that this way so I can trim off the selvage. And since this isn't a garment, so I'm not going to really worry about the selvage. I am simply going to count over 15 inches and cut that. And I will tell you why I do double check when I measure that is because this end of my cutting board, since I've changed it out, starts over at 24 inches. I mean, I know it should be at 9, taking away 15 from that, but I do double check. I'm only going to need one piece for the front, and then I will need one piece for the back, or the inside. So I am going to measure another piece. Let me get this trimmed up. Evened up. Now, I am going to measure this 9 what'd I say? 9, 10 1/4. I think I said 9 1/4. That's not what I meant. Got a lot of threads in there. I am going to cut another piece at 10 1/4 as well. Now, I am going to straighten this one up and measure out that 15.5 inches. That will be the piece for the inside. We don't need the extra. That can be used for probably a bookmark. And I'm not sure if I have enough to do 8 inches this way, because I need 2 pieces that are 8 inches by by how tall it is. And that is, I can get 2 pieces out of that. Then I'll come back and I'll cut 1 8 piece, because this will be the sleeve part. And these pieces will be actually folded in half this way. So let me get that. Now, the way that we're going to layer this and take it to the sewing machine is we are going to take these, fold it in half. We are going to place the open side along this end right here. Okay, so I am going to cut this lovely little flowered pattern at 10 1/4 by 15.5. And this was a remnant from something else that I had done. So let me trim up one of these edges. Actually, I'll go ahead and do both. Get them nice and even. Trim off that selvage. Now, since I'm only making 1 book cover, I can get that cut off there. I am going to open this up and just cut 1 piece of fabric. It's 2 layers, so I'm just going to open that up so I can cut that. And we need 15.5, which would make it 9.5 this way. Now, the way that we're going to do this is I'm going to lay down my big piece of my the inside. I am going to lay down my folded in half pieces, the open side to the outside here. Okay, I'm going to do the same on the other side. And lay that there. Then I'm going to take this pretty side and lay it down on top of it, matching those corners, those edges. Normally I would clip it, but I'm going to pin it. But before I do that, let me get a couple of pins. I have a couple sitting up here, just waiting to be used. I'll go ahead and pin those. And you don't have to do a lot of pinning, although it's nice to do the pinning. I am going to leave an opening for my turning. But before I take it over to the machine, I am going to lay my book on here. And roughly to about 1/4 of an inch. And I am actually just going to draw around it and around those corners, because many times these are rounded corners. Well, I got a pen that doesn't want to mark. Story of my life. So I'm just going to draw around those edges so that I can get a more rounded edge. And you could draw all the way around if you're not used to sewing. This is a great way to make sure you stay on the lines or right next to the lines. I've had some people tell me this is a cheating method, but I don't think it's cheating. There are many pattern designers that suggest you do that. You're wanting to get those corners so you know where the round is. That way it fits a little bit better. So now we're ready to take it to the machine and sew. So I'll see you over there. All right, we're ready to sew. Now remember, I've left an opening, so I'm going to start at one edge where that opening is, and we're just going to sew. And if you're worried about hitting the line, you can bring your hand wheel to press down directly on your line to get started. You need to back tack. Mine has a knot that it automatically puts it into, so I don't always back tack. However, I do back tack on where you feel the fold of the pocket. You can sew directly on the line. I'm not sure my bobbin is being a stinker. Or you can sew next to it. You can go very slow around those rounded edges. I'm going to put my needle down to remove that pin because it's pretty close to the edge. And then again, when you get to the next corner, if it's rounded, you just want to go slow around that corner. Okay, and we're coming up to the next fold. So I'm going to back tack there. I've reached another fold, so I'm going to back tack there. And I'm coming up to another rounded corner, so I'm going to go a little bit slower there. Reached my other corner. And you see, I didn't quite turn it fast enough, so I got a little bit of a bump there. So I'm going to go past where my fold is. Now I've reached my end where I've got my opening, so I am going to end that here. You want to trim your threads. You do want to look to make sure you've encased the entire thing. If this is the first time for you, you may have missed it. You may find some issues. I found one right there, and I'm going to repair that. Basically, as I got off a little bit on my line. And I've caught everything into it. Now, I am going to trim away. I am going to use pinking shears on my corners because pinking shears will act like I've put in darts or snipped around it, so it doesn't, one, it keeps it from fraying. Two, it helps it ease around those corners and then back around your piece. You could trim all the way around. I don't always do that. If I need to trim, I will do that after I've tried it onto the book that I'm making the cover for. And I just go around the corners. I don't really worry about the rest of it. Don't cut into your stitching line. If you do not have pinking shears, you can take your scissors and basically just snip around that corner a couple times. Around like this, around the corner, and that'll help ease it in. Okay, we're going to find our opening here, and we're going to turn it right side out. There's a lot of people that will tell you to use your scissors to round out your corners and get everything situated correctly. I do not use my scissors because if you use your scissors, you're more likely to poke a hole in your fabric. So I just use chopstick. Go in and poke out those corners, round them out. You could top stitch if you wanted to. I'm not going to. Not right now. I'm going to try it on the book first, and then we'll see. But I am going to go ahead and close up this opening. And the easiest way to do that is basically to go into where the opening where your seams are, pull it, and generally when you pull it, it'll fold in on itself the way that you want it to go. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's stubborn. So you just want to double check to make sure you're getting that in nice and neat. You could take it to the iron to do it. Many times I just finger press it, or I use my hair marker to do that. You could put pins in it if you needed to, but I'm not real worried about it. You could hand sew this closed. I'm not going to. I'm going to stitch it closed. I am going to do it at a fourth of an inch, an eighth of an inch from the edge. Actually, I think I will stitch around an eighth of an inch around. We'll see what happens. And you can top stitch from the other side. You know, for me, this is not a big show piece, so I'm not worried about it. It's for my personal use, so you may want to get in there and make sure that your seams don't bunch up. And one of the ways you do that is just kind of roll it back and forth in your fingers. Pressing does help. And yes, your iron is your friend, even though I don't like to do all that ironing. I find most of the time that this works just fine doing it this way. Probably should have pressed it. But this is not one that I would be selling, so I'm not gonna sweat it. And then when we're finished, we're just going to trim up our strings, unless you want to leave those strings for extra. All right, let's try it on. So you're going to just slip your notebook into your case. And yes, this is going to be a tight fit, and I want it to be a tight fit. You could add another 1/4 of an inch if you do not want a tight fit. Another 1/8 of an inch to it. And that is entirely up to you. Now, this part is going to be a little more difficult. Let me get you in a better position. Get a little better light on that. This part, you're going to bring your book up in that little T formation, like a tent formation. Going to slip that in there and position it the way you want it to be. And I do need to bring this up a little bit. Okay. Like I said, I knew mine was going to be a tight fit. I wanted it to be a tight fit. Your fabric is going to stretch over time just from being where it's at. So it will stretch to fit. If you're worried about it not stretching to fit, like I said, add an additional 1/4 of an inch. Add an inch to it around, and it'll work out fine for you. I know that this is going to stretch. I've done this many times, and it stretches quite a bit. So and I've seen it stretch many times. So there you have it. You have a book cover made for your book, your notebook, whatever you want. Like I said, I know that this is a tight fit, and that's what I wanted for this one. I have done some before where I've added 3/4 of an inch around, and it was loose. Every time I turned around, one part of the book was coming out of it. You know, one arm of the book was coming out of it. So I know that the fabric does stretch a little bit because I didn't put any interfacing or any batting on this. I know that it is going to stretch somewhat. But if you're worried about it, instead of adding a 1/2 inch around, add 3/4 of an inch to your piece, and you should have plenty of room. And might be a little baggy at times, but it's completely up to you what you want. Nice tight fit. All right, guys, that's it. That is the finishing for this one.